Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a new project video for you guys where we are going to be upgrading engines by first downgrading them. And now here's what I mean. So I have these two Paragon 2 engines here, BLI Paragon 2 engines, and I'm going to be basically replacing them with these counterparts that are made earlier in their QSI, precision craft era models. Now, at first glance, that might seem like a downgrade. I'm replacing newer engines with older run ones. Why would I ever do that? QSI sounds terrible. But here's the reasons why I think it's an upgrade. So for one, Paragon 2 sound, in my opinion, is probably the best sounding Paragon system out of the four they currently have. Paragon 4 sounds okay, but it just sounds like a rebrand of Paragon 3. Paragon 3 sounds really washed out, and not to mention the quality control is really bad, and I just don't like the sounds at all. Paragon 2 sounds pretty decent in my opinion. It's the best out of the four, but it's sounding really old now, I think, at this point. And I just have too many Paragon 2 engines, and they all sound kind of the same. So, and then obviously Paragon 1, aka QSI, sounds really bad, in my opinion. But I'm getting kind of tired of Paragon 2 sound, and I feel like these are kind of overdue for a decoder upgrade. And at the same time, why would I rip out nice Paragon 2 electronics when instead I could just rip out a cheaper QSI decoder? Not only does that mean, I can sell this one off for a little bit more money, and I'm basically sacrificing, cheaper electronics, with ESU anyways. It doesn't really matter which one I use. But also, replacing these with ESU or TCS or any other decoder brand is way easier than replacing one of these, because these have a daughter board inside the engine, also a smoke unit inside these engines. So, the pinout for the plug in the back is a lot more complicated than these. These are very simple. There's 6 wires. It's 2 lights for the headlight, 2 for the motor, and 2 for the pickup. There's 6 wires total. This is 8. There's like a comms wire. There's a 3.3 volt wire. There's a chuff sync wire. Like, it's way more confusing with these engines. So it's a lot harder. And that's the reason why ESU made, that encoder buddy, which makes this a lot easier. But I think anyone can do a decoder install on this style engine. So that's point one, which is, I would rather sacrifice a crappy QSI decoder and do an easier install than this, than sacrifice a nicer, more expensive Paragon 2 electronic system and make the install more difficult for myself. So that's point one, why I think it's an upgrade. Point two is that I think I mentioned this before in other videos, but these, because these engines are, remakes, they're reruns of the older, engines, these engines were made of plastic. They're plastic shells, plastic boilers, and then with a big giant die-cast weight inside the boiler to compensate for the fact that they're a little bit lighter. This thing is actually really heavy. It's like a brick. Maybe not as heavy as those die-cast engines with die-cast weights inside, but it's still quite heavy. And more importantly, the weight is perfectly balanced on the roughly slightly ahead of the center driver maybe, but it's still relatively balanced. You can see that. And that's because, they designed this mechanism where the motor is heavy and sits in the back and the giant weight in the front counterbalances it, so this thing is perfectly centered. And this thing weighs quite a bit too. If we put this on the scale here, we're going to do US ounces. It's basically 15 ounces right there. If I put this Paragon 2 engine in, what Paragon 2 did was they took the existing setup. They didn't modify anything at all. They still kept the boiler still 100% plastic, but they just got rid of that giant lead weight. And in its place, they put a tiny little lead weight, or I believe, is it lead or is it die cast? I don't even know. But a tiny little weight and then a giant smoke unit. And the smoke unit weighs obviously a whole lot less than the original lead weight. And so as a result, this engine with its plastic shell and otherwise, still lightweight construction, now has lost a lot of weight in the front. So not only does this make this engine a lot lighter, as you can see here, it is only 12 ounces. So it's, or 12.5 ounces. So it's a whole 2.5 ounces lighter. But also, because the motor is heavy and the weight's now concentrated in the back, this thing is really uneven in terms of its balance. If I lift it from the center driver, you can see it vastly shifts to the rear. I'm not even doing anything. I'm literally holding it in the center and it just wants to lift up. These engines are really off balance. This one's a little bit better, but it's still not great. You can see that the front just jumps up. And that's really bad because weight is good and all, but even more importantly is that the weight needs to be balanced to the drivers. If it's not balanced, then extra weight really doesn't do you any good. And by the way, that still holds true for these same engines in the later reruns of Paragon 3 and Paragon 4. As long as it's an engine that was originally designed in the Paragon 1 era with the plastic boiler and the giant weight, as long as they've been reran with a smoke unit replacement, they're gonna be really light and barely pull anything. And that's probably why these I1SAs have such a bad reputation for being terrible pullers, especially without a traction tire. These things pull almost nothing. It's really pathetic, and it's got its bad reputation. But that's because a lot of people who bought these has never seen one of these older PCM early Paragon 1 runs. These things pull really good, and if they held one of these, they wouldn't feel like they pull nothing. It's because of these later runs that really gave it its bad reputation, and it's a shame because these are really nice models. So anyways, this thing is significantly lighter than this. Again, it was 2.5 ounces lighter, and for you guys that are visual learners, this is 2.5 ounces. You guys have definitely seen these, 1/4 ounce weights. 2.5 ounces is, what is this? 10 ounces, 10 1/4 ounce weights. So imagine, so this is how much weight you're losing. You're losing 10 of these pieces, switching from this to that. And if we look at the J1 Hudsons here, if we take this one, this thing's really, really heavy. This old QSI one, 1 pound, 9 ounces. So that's basically 17 ounces. And if we look at this one, also roughly 12.5 ounces. So these two are basically the same weight. So if anything, this difference in weight is even more significant. That would be these plus 2 more. So that's how much weight you're losing going from this to this, because this smoke unit inside here is massive, and there's a lot of empty space here too, that previously was full of that weight. So these two engines are really light. This one's not even balanced because they got rid of the front weight without compensating anything. They were designed originally with the intention of the front let weight in front, and when you subtract that, you get these engines that are unbalanced and lightweight. Anyways, I think I've exaggerated this point already enough. But point being is these two are lightweight, and I don't use smoke units anyways. So I am going to use these engines instead. These two rely on the traction tires. These two will not pull anything without traction tires. These two, you don't even really need the traction tires. They pull pretty good. I mean, obviously not as much as if they had traction tires, which they came with as well, so I can add traction tires if I want to. But these pull so much. These two pull nothing. So to trade in my Paragon 2 engine for an older engine, while it may seem like a downgrade, because I'm replacing the electronics anyways with ESU in this case, and TCS for this, this is actually a pretty big upgrade, for me at least. It makes the DCC installation process easier. I'm saving money this way because I don't need to buy I can sell this engine off for more money. And I'm getting a much heavier engine. I didn't have to put any work into it, and I automatically gained this much weight inside these engines. But the project is basically just going to be swapping some parts back and forth, and then adding the decoder, in this case a TCS, and in this one an ECU decoder, into these engines. And that's basically it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. More specifically for these two models, I swapped the wheels already, actually. Originally I painted the axle ends and the leading wheel on this engine, and instead of having to do the same thing as this engine, I just simply swapped the wheels around, and that's all I had to do. So now I can sell this one off at stock, and that saves me the trouble of having to paint more wheels. And then also this has an incandescent bulb, which I want to replace with an LED, and then obviously install the TCS decoder into the tender. For this one, it's going to be a little bit more involved because I upgraded this one quite a bit. I repainted the smoke box silver, as you can see, more of like a dark graphite. Replaced the headlight because the stock headlight is really undersized and looks really funny. And I think the new headlight looks really good. I have a whole other video, by the way, covering this already, this project. It was actually quite involved. But yeah, painting the cab interior with all the little gauges, painting the wheels, axles, black and stuff. And just making a few minor detail upgrades. But basically, I'm just going to swap the shells and call it a day. And then obviously do the installation in this fella here. I bought this engine. The reason why this was so cheap, by the way, is because it didn't come with any electronics. So I'm basically I got an empty tender with nothing inside. So these are my own speakers I'm putting in, and basically I'm gonna add sound to this. Very, very simple stuff. And then yeah, I'm gonna sell these two off. I'm probably gonna sell off that QSI decoder from this guy for like 20 bucks or whatever it's worth. And then call it a day. I'll have 2 upgraded engines with good sound and pulls well. Anyways, that's the project. Let's move on to actually showing you what I'm gonna do. I took the shell off of the Decapod without the smoke unit, and with the original intention of replacing the headlight with an LED. But actually, when I took the front of the smoke box off, I realized there was a plug here, so I could have just I did the headlight replacement without taking the entire thing apart. But anyways, since I already had it apart, I figured I would show you guys inside. You can see how massive that lead weight is. It is lead, it's not die cast, because it's soft. And you can see from like roughly here all the way till the front. There's a little, open space here. Basically that entire section is full of lead. Additionally, you'll notice that the headlight wires conveniently have these nice little springs. So there's actually no wires you gotta, tug on or whatever. It's just spring contacts that touch here. So there's no wires. It's just wireless. You could take the shell right off without any problem. And that's honestly so nice. And the Paragon 2 and onwards engines don't have this. There's a giant ass wire plug that goes between here and there. It's like 15 wires with a smoke unit and a reed switch here. And it's just a lot of stuff in here that means less space for weight. So yeah, honestly, just find this really impressive. This is a really thoughtful design, well engineered, very thoughtful for the person that has to take this apart. And the inside is just crammed to the brim with weight. This little open slot here is so it doesn't touch the gearbox or the drive shaft here. So but everywhere else inside here is just covered in weight. So honestly, really good design, and I wish Paragon 2 and onwards kept some of this very thoughtful engineering, but oh well. I just found this interesting. Hopefully someone else out there also did. All right, working on the I1SA first. So I already had this mostly done. I replaced the headlight bulb with an LED. You can see the LED is inside there. And because there was a giant hole made on the back of the headlight for the bulb, I actually filled it in with a piece of plastic. So filled in that giant hole. So yes, it's solid now. And it's the tiny little headlight wires go down, straight down into the boiler. And then the lens, I never was a huge fan of these BLI lenses. They tend to look like this, like a bullseye almost. So I took the lens out and I sanded it down. So now there is still a little hole in the middle, which I couldn't get rid of. But that being said, this lens is a lot more, I guess, flat. So there's none of those circles and whatnot, which makes it look kind of plasticky. But I basically just took the lens out and just sanded the back down until it was like this. For the tender, I ripped out all the electronics. I put in one of those 3D printed speaker enclosures that I mentioned in a previous video. If you guys are curious, I will link it down below. And I think that really improves the speaker quality of these existing speakers, which in my opinion are totally fine. And I added a TCS board, hardwired everything with 21 pins. And yeah, so everything's all wired in. The last thing I want to do for this is I want to drill out the rear marker lights, and I think it'll be quite easy to do. I normally don't really care about rear marker lights, but the thing is, this is an I1SA, and unlike most engines that I run, which the engine will be at the front of the train, these I1SAs historically were often used as pusher units. So it wouldn't be uncommon for the rear tender marker lights to work. And since these markers are relatively easy to light up because they're just built into the tender, I'm gonna just add some regular LEDs inside to light that up. I think that'll be a nice little feature. So yeah, just a little thing. Since this decoder can do 6 function outputs and I'm only using 2 currently, I figured I would add some marker lights. But anyways, that's the I1SA currently. I will show you guys what it looks like once it's done. I've been sanding down these 3mm red LEDs to fit them better inside the little tiny corners. Although to get the light in the center to be centered with the holes that I drilled out, which you can see look like that. All right, the rear lights are installed. You can see they each got their own resistor. So let's put this thing back together and see how she runs. And here she is on the track. You can see the headlight is nice and yellow. The new SMD LED looks really good. And on the rear, you could see the 2 marker lights. And if I go to reverse, the rear light. So this is the I1SA complete, and we'll work on the J1 next. Alright, I've taken 2 boiler weights out of the 2 Hudsons. This is from the Paragon 1 and this is from the Paragon 2. You can see the Paragon 2 one is the one which I worked on the detailing before, so that's why you see this custom headlight. But you can see that this boiler weight's very small. This entire front section is just a smoke unit which barely weighs anything. And then what's remaining of the boiler weight, you can see there's a big cutout here for where the gearbox sits, and then there's also another really big cutout at the top here where the electronics sit. And so this boiler weight basically extends from like here, where that little gearbox part cutout is, to about here. And then this is where the smoke unit's at, and that's like that. This is the Paragon 1 boiler weight. This is much longer. You can see that extends, instead of these, the smoke unit, it's just full lead weight. There's a little bit of a cutout in the front for where the light sits, but this is all lead weight. And then the back here, you can see it sort of, ends at the same place. You obviously have the same gearbox cutout, but then all this extra space here is also being utilized. So in other words, the boiler weight goes from like here, so it sits all the way here, all the way to the front. This entire area is just lead weight. And this really shows in the weight difference. So if we put this on a scale, it's 8.5 ounces. And if we put this one on the scale, it's 4 ounces. So it's literally less than half of the size of the Paragon 2, or of the Paragon weight. So it's crazy how much of a sacrifice you are moving from Paragon to Paragon 2. And that's the reason why, for me, this is a bigger upgrade. I don't need the smoke unit. I can get rid of that. It also just melts the plastic boilers. So I'll happily take this any day. And especially since I'm going to upgrade decoders anyways, which we're going to do next with this ESU Loksound 5 decoder, I really don't see any point keeping this. I'll take this any day. So anyways, just wanted to show you guys the visual difference, and we'll get back to the video. Alright, I swapped the electronics on the Hudson now. The giant boiler weight is now inside the shell with the graphite that I worked on. I added a little cab light in the front here, or in the back. Wires go through here, headlight wires go through here. I have a little wire plug, detachable wire plug, so I can remove the shell if I needed to. And then here is the 7-pin plug I added to the back, which will connect to the tender. So I'm going to put this back together, and the engine should be done. We should work on the tender next, which currently looks like this. Made a 3D printed speaker enclosure, just like the I1SA. Here's the male end of the plug I'll wire with, and the decoder's here. And I added some electrical tape to, again, also just prevent the vibrations from the tender to the shell. So we will work on the tender next. All right, and the J1D is done. You can see the headlight is nice and bright. The cab light is fairly subtle, but it is definitely there. And the rear light is also nice and bright. And that is the J1D done. She looks really good in my opinion. and I'm really happy with how she turned out. Since I already was working on this engine, taking everything apart, I figured I would install a few modifications and or upgrades that I already had planned for this engine anyways. And I figured I'd share these with you. So first things first, I think I mentioned this already in the beginning of the video, but I repainted the cab and the tender shells because the original tender shells had a stripe lettering, stripes, and then Roman lettering. And since I modeled the late 40s, the Gothic font would be more appropriate for me, so I repainted this and this, and obviously recut the letters in the back to more properly reflect my era. I also added a custom coal load for this tender shell. I think it turned out pretty good. I specifically chose a finer coal material because this is a stoker equipped engines, and stokers couldn't handle really chunky coal. So I had to specifically use a finer ground mixture here. I just basically sprinkled a light layer on top and sealed it with some Elmer's glue, and then added some black washes on top. Another thing I did was add fill in the frame here. BLI engines have kind of a reputation for having like missing frame pieces here, where the area above the trailing truck is just see-through, and so it looks like the cabin firebox is kind of just floating on top of the trailing truck. So I 3D printed a piece to glue on the frame to kind of fill in that black void, or fill in that void, so you can't just see through that area. And then lastly, I added the missing Alesco oil skimmer here. You'll see this on top of the tender. This is a detail that's often forgotten about by a lot of modeling companies, but all New York Central engines that had Alesco feed water heaters would also have this. In this case, BLI made the J1E, and they basically just they originally intended to only make the J1E, but they made a few modifications to make the J1D, but they forgot to add this. But yeah, so anyways, I added that, which is cool. That's a precision skill part if you guys are curious. But that's pretty much it for upgrades. The two things I still need to do that are missing is adding the headlight wire and conduit here, and then adding the missing cam box, which you would see on the engineer side between the second and third drivers. But otherwise, this engine's basically at a mostly complete state. I'm very happy with how it looks so far, and so anyways, we'll move on to the conclusion. And just like that, I got two new engines that are swaps for like engines I originally had, but now this time with a lot more weight and better sounding sound decoders. But anyways, hopefully this project someone found interesting out there, or found it helpful. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment down below, and I try my best to answer all of them. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.